Our next presentation is from a team of professors, Paulina Lee, the Assistant Professor of Latin American and Iberian Cultures at Columbia University, and Anupama Rao, the Tao Associate Professor of History at Barnard College and Associate Director of Columbia University's Institute for Comparative Literature. Anna and Anu are directors of a Women Creating Change project, Geographies of Inequality, Gender and the City. Women Creating Change is a program within the Center for the Study of Social Difference, engaging feminist scholars to focus on contemporary global problems affecting women. Please welcome Professors Paulina Lee and Anupama Rao for their TED Talk here today.
Good morning. Now, as the world continues to urbanize and globalize, the global population of slum dwellers also continues to grow. UN Habitat estimates that nearly 1 billion people live in informal or substandard housing settlements, known by the catch-all term slum. In fact, urban slums are today the fastest growing human habitat across the world. Now, slums are called favelas in Latin America. They're called kampungs in Southeast Asia. They're called gekekondu in Turkey, and basti across many parts of South Asia. Now, they go by different names, but they share something in common. These spaces describe the geography of inequality. We associate these places with social exclusion, with the stigma of poverty, and with routine violence. But we tend to forget that slums are produced by social forces, by state indifference, by poor or inefficient planning, by political corruption, and by the unequal distribution of resources. And we rarely think of the people who come from these places, who live in slums, as agents of change, as having something to teach us about creative strategies of survival or human flourishing, especially if they happen to be women. But women have been at the forefront of struggles for housing, for sanitation, and safe space across the world's slums. Now, it may not surprise you to know that women routinely had households that survive on their hard work and sacrifice. But how many of us know that women are at the forefront of international human rights organizations like Slum Dwellers International, an organization that brings slum dwellers across vast geographical and political divides, and that seeks to transcend social differences of race, of caste, of religion, and ethnicity? Now, at Women Creating Change, we approach issues such as the right to housing, safety, education, sanitation, as women's rights and human rights issues. Our project, Gender in the Global Slum, works collaboratively and comparatively and seeks to harness the collective power of women who've engaged in struggles against poverty and precarity. Now, how do these women approach global processes, such as urbanization, migration, and large-scale economic transformation in unique and interconnected ways? What can we learn from women and from their struggles for dignity and self-worth? Thinking globally while respecting social histories and social histories of difference is what defines and distinguishes our approach.
Rocinha is Rio de Janeiro's largest favela. It is also the largest favela in all of Latin America. About 1 in 4 people who live in Rio, a city with a population of about 6.4 million people, live in a favela. Most women who live in favelas work as housekeepers for the city's middle class. They earn an average of $40 a day for about 10 to 12 hours of housekeeping work. Often they travel 2 hours or more to get to work each way. Women's labor is thus underpaid, and oftentimes it's unpaid. Though their labor keeps Rio's middle-class households running, they often do not have access to basic services like sanitation, running water, electricity, and they definitely don't have access to daycare. At Women Creating Change, we begin with the premise that housing inequality is at the root of women's poverty. Housing inequality not merely describes a lack of basic services, but it actually jeopardizes social relationships, the relationships that are built on care, intimacy, and security, the very things that define our idea of home. The women I have worked with have struggled to keep their families together and their children safe in an environment that treats them as though their lives do not matter. They have resiliently faced social exclusion and race and class-based discrimination that excludes people and their families for the reason of merely that they cannot afford safe and secure housing. It is due to women's creativity that Hosinga is not a deprived shanty town. But because of their hard work, it's actually a thriving city within a city. There are over 1,250 commercial businesses in Hosinga alone. And women have been at the forefront of entrepreneurial endeavors, from selling cakes and cookies and coffee on the street to opening their own bakeries and restaurants. It's also where you can find some of the best sushi in town. Women have been at the forefront of entrepreneurial endeavors. They have also fought to defend their businesses against gang extortion and exploitative landlords. Our work at Women Creating Change is dedicated to making their contributions vocal and visible. As early as 1977, a group of women organized and took over the Association of Residents of Hosinga. They created cleanup crews and fought for a campaign to build a footbridge to connect Hosinga to the rest of the city. Even though Hosinga is located directly next to the wealthiest neighborhoods in Rio, until then people had to cross a major freeway just to go to work. Individual women like Francisca Pirozzi have made their mark as well. Francisca struggled to take classes in preschool education so that she could open a preschool in Hosinga to educate the young children of working mothers. Celebrating women like Francisca and their achievements, however, does not mean that we're ignoring the kinds of urban poverty and violence that impact women around the world. But it does mean that when we learn from and listen to women like Francisca, we can devise better strategies for change. Women have been at the forefront of desegregating housing and education.
You know, it takes skill and resilience to navigate life in a slum. Mumbai slums are dense settlements that require insider knowledge to get around. People build their homes with tin and plastic, and then wait to be able to afford cement to regularize these homes. They routinely tap into existing power lines for their electricity, and they illegally extend the city's water pipes to access potable water. Men and children often sleep on the streets at night and risk being run over because there's no space inside their homes. Now, I call slums self-housing. These are works in progress that people create and adapt to suit their own conditions of life. Now, over 60% of Mumbai's residents are classified as living in slums. Slums take up about 11% of urban land in Mumbai. Mumbai's current population is 22 million. So we're talking about 12 to 14 million people who live in makeshift shelters in the fourth largest city in the world. Dharavi, Asia's largest slum, itself has a population of over 1 million people. Now, policy planners and government officials tend to think about slums as being data dark, as being off the grid. They're anything but that. These are thriving centers of economic activity. Leatherwork, garment production, recycling plastic, separating garbage. These are just some of the activities that you'll find in Dharavi today. The annual revenue in Dharavi exceeds $1 billion a year. And you've got 5,000 businesses and 12,500 single-room factories in Dharavi who generate this kind of economy. Leather goods from Dharavi routinely make their way to high-end fashion houses in Europe and in the United States. Animation studios in Dharavi produce content for Hollywood as well as for Bollywood. Now, spatial differences are anchored by social difference. And what you often have across Mumbai are slums situated next to high-rises and posh bungalows, because bungalows and posh towers depend on the cheap labor of slum dwellers in order to survive. So in Mumbai, the high-rise and the slum, the intended and the unintended city coexist. But they exist in parallel universes. One is legal, it's recognized. The other is subject to routine demolition and evictions. This indeed is a geography of inequality, and it's anchored by social differences of religion, of caste, of gender, and class. Now, everyone works in the slum, but women work especially hard. One of the people I work with, Kunda, works in 8 to 12 homes every day. Suhaila is a childminder. Now, their employers need and depend on these women for their own labor, but neither of them is able to make sure that her child goes to school. Roshan is a daily wage construction worker. Her labor involves carrying bricks on her head for 8 to 10 hours a day. Now, other women in slums opt for home-based work. They make pickles, they fabricate jewelry. Almost all of them spend hours every day waiting at public water taps to fill their buckets. You'll often see young girls on trains in Mumbai selling cheap toys and plastic hair clips. Now, every woman who works in the slums is subject to catcalls and much worse. Sexual harassment is rampant in these spaces. And jilted lovers have been known to throw acid on unsuspecting women. Most of the women that I know avoid going to use public amenities. Toilets rarely have water for washing, and most of them lack the privacy of doors. But despite all of this, women have come together and routinely do so to fight for their rights and to struggle against demolitions and evictions. M Ward, which is near Dharavi, contains one of the largest populations of slum dwellers across Mumbai. Many of them have actually been relocated from other parts of the city. Now, this area is known colloquially as a dumping ground, but it's anything but that. The group, known as Spark, teaches women construction work so that they can struggle for formal housing and build the homes that they want to live in. The group, called Herbs, challenges the idea that all slum dwellers want to escape their homes and leave the slums, and instead tries to work with them to develop creative strategies of self-housing. Muslim women who have been forbidden from attending government schools have created women-led madrasas in the neighborhood. This is a young group of girls who are coding. Almost every woman that I know in slums has historically struggled and organized to fight the political power of builders who are seeking to relocate them and use slum land to build high-end housing. Women have run for elections and engaged in mass public protests. So all of this goes to show that women engage in public activism in addition to the invisible labor that they perform on a daily basis. M Ward, Dharavi, Hoseinia, all of these spaces reflect the paradox of the slum. These are spaces that are thriving with the creative energy and activism of women, but they're also places of economic desperation, of sheer state indifference, and failed ambition.
Urban segregation and social exclusion is as much a problem in the United States as it is in Brazil and India. Through our collaborations in Mumbai and Rio, we are gaining a global perspective on our massive housing crisis. And we are finding that women are at the forefront of finding solutions and building bridges. They have shown us that the slum or the favela is a place of innovation, dignity, and resilience. Their work is our inspiration. But how do we work with them and enable creative solutions? We are reimagining the space of the classroom and developing teaching models where we bring Columbia students into collaborative projects with students living in M Ward and Rocinha. We empower college students in New York, Mumbai, and Rio to transcend differences of class, race, nation, and caste. We encourage them to work together to imagine new, equitable urban futures. This is possible because students see connections between Rio's favelas, Mumbai slums, and urban poverty across the United States. And they see that these spaces are intimately connected. They are learning that housing inequality and women's strategies for survival are everywhere. In our mixed classrooms, students come to see slum women as scholar practitioners who have much to teach us about survival and resistance. Our work at Women Creating Change pairs the power of digital technology, feminist pedagogy, and social action to enthuse students to become thought leaders for finding sustainable solutions for the most pressing issues of our time. Our work is already expanding. We are now collaborating with scholars working on Detroit and New York, Beijing, and Manila. We believe this is only the beginning for modeling social action based in feminist scholarship. Thank you.
Wow, all of this is so inspiring.